Awesome. Let's see. All right. We're live. We are live, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Very excited to be talking to you today. And I have a special guest here, Mr. Scott Greenberg. Scott, thanks for joining us.
So glad to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. You're becoming one of my favorite people to talk to in the franchise space, and I've been reading your book, and as you can see, I've been going old school and even tearing up sticky notes and making little notes. So I'm really excited for our conversation tonight.
I've been looking forward to it.
Awesome. So it looks like we already have people hopping on. So that's great. So we're going to be streaming here on Zoom as well as on YouTube. As we're going through this, if you have any questions, make sure to drop them. We'll try to make it as interactive as possible, and then you'll be able to watch the replay on YouTube as well. So Scott, you wrote the book, The Wealthy Franchisee. And obviously that's very, very specific. You're known in the franchise space. For those of us who don't know you, can you tell us a little bit about your background and how you got into franchising?
Sure. So I was working as a professional speaker long before I got into franchising, motivational speaking, leadership training, that kind of thing. Like a lot of speakers, I've been doing it for a long time, and I didn't have as much business experience as I would have liked. And I didn't want to be one of these speakers who, I hate to use the word hack, but really don't have a lot of, experience in the weeds to back up what they're saying. A lot of speakers are quoting other speakers or books they've read, or just sort of, regurgitating these cliches. I wanted some real world experience in addition to another stream of income. And so I decided to buy my first franchise as a bit of a laboratory, place where I could try out the concepts that I've been speaking on, that I'd heard about, to see if they really work. And if not, to figure out what does work. So obviously I wanted to make money from the business, but as important as earning was learning. And so when I got the idea to do this, I happened to see an airline magazine ad for edible arrangements. And I thought that's really cool and unusual. And before I knew it, I was calling them and then flying out for a discovery day. And then I started signing lots of things. And before I knew it, I had my first of what would ultimately be 2 edible arrangement stores. And that's where my journey really began. For more than a decade, I was a multi-unit franchisee.
Wow, that's amazing. And throughout your process of selecting edible arrangements, did you look at other franchisors? Like, how did you mentally go through that process and be able to get to making a decision to choosing edible arrangements and feeling good about it? Not that this is a pitch for edible arrangements, but more so the psychology of actually selecting and choosing a franchise.
I was completely impulsive. I would not recommend anybody do what I did. Not that I regret it being edible arrangements. I got lucky that for me, it turned out to be a great fit and a very successful business. What I should have done is say, okay, I'm interested in a franchise business. I should have explored lots of businesses. I do recommend that people align themselves with a coach or a broker, someone who can present them lots of ideas. Let them, it doesn't cost you anything, let them do all the groundwork and present you options. I should have looked at a lot of different options, then see what was the right fit. For me, I was kind of generally thinking I'd like to have some kind of retail business. I saw the ad. I flew to them to Connecticut, had the meeting. I thought, this is cool. I want to do it. So it was very risky, very irresponsible, but that's how I roll. So, that's more awesome. That's more of a cautionary tale. Having said that, though, I would say that I meet a lot. I get phone calls from people who just want some advice and some help. Yesterday, I had a phone call with a 20-year-old who's a college student who wants to buy a franchise now. And he takes classes at the Titus Center for Franchising in Florida. And he's just been analyzing and thinking and asking questions, as anyone should. And the fact that he's 20, he's doing it is great. But he's asking so many questions and all these delaying. And that at some point, you have to take a leap of faith. He should go slow given his age. But at some point, you do have to pull the trigger. There's no guarantee. But I was the other extreme. I'm like, sure, let's do it.
That's really funny.
Right. So don't do what I did. I really got lucky that it turned out to work out.
Yeah, my wife and I had a similar experience. We did a little bit of due diligence, but we, generally speaking, we had kind of narrowed it down to the juice and smoothie bar space. But kind of for I don't want to say the wrong reasons, but just knowing what I know now, I might have gone through a different process, but kind of same with you, which is I feel like I got lucky and, wind up choosing a great business that was quality. And how crazy is that 20-year-olds looking into franchises? I had a 17-year-old email me from Jamaica today that said that she's in 11th grade and that she wants to own a franchise at some point and wanted to get my advice. That's wild. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think that, more and more people, they like the idea. I don't want to say get rich quick, but like the idea of going for it. And especially these days, there's a huge problem in the labor market that people just can't staff their businesses. I think people are tired of not getting paid well, not being treated well. And because they've stayed home collecting unemployment and have gotten other advantages, they've sort of realized that, wow, maybe there's another way to live here. And people want more for themselves. And so franchising is a great alternative. 17 is pretty young. I don't even think you can legally sign a contract to make that happen. But what a cool thing for people to be thinking about that, And plenty of people are thinking about just spending a bunch of money on college without any guarantee that that's going to lead to employment or anything like that. I think it's great that people are exploring it. But I'll tell you, I was coaching someone else the other day who's thinking about pulling the trigger, and they have a specific brand that they're interested in, and they wanted to get my opinion. And I was asking questions. They kept trying to sell it to me, and so I had to finally put the stop and say, listen, it's up to you. You have to make the determination if this brand is the right fit for you. But I want you to be aware of your own biases. The way you're asking questions, it sounds like you have already decided you like it, and now you're trying to confirm that. It's called confirmation bias. I talk about this in the book. We do it when we're selecting a business. We do it when we're interviewing employees. We make a lot of decisions where emotionally we want this one to be the one. So rather than objectively looking at it and keeping our minds open to not liking that decision, we look for things to confirm what we want to be true. And when I called him out on that, he said, you know what, I think you're right. So we had a really good conversation about how to avoid that. And I hope it's helpful for him.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, confirmation bias is fascinating, and I see that with people too. Whereas they get excited about a specific franchise, Scott, and then they don't look at it. They don't look at anything else. But yeah, that's really interesting. So let's talk about the overall Wealthy Franchisee. You wrote the book and you really have this brand, which is, really supporting franchise owners and franchisors in helping their franchisees become more successful in their franchise business. And, when I started reading I was already impressed by you because you and I had some conversations, and I started reading your book and I thought, wow, I just felt really blown away. And you talk about the concept of kind of what makes someone a wealthy franchisee versus people that fail as franchise owners. Can you talk a little bit about kind of at a high level, like what some of those characteristics are?
Sure. And, most people get in franchising aren't the high level wealthy franchisee, nor are they the struggling franchisee. Most people are the typical franchisee, someone who's doing okay. They're getting the bills paid. Maybe they're making a living, but they sort of hit this ceiling and they get stuck there. They're working really hard and they're sticking to the system, but they just can't seem to break to that highest level because they just don't know what's missing. They don't really know what to do. And so that's really, I think, the greatest opportunity in franchising. A lot of franchisors informally rate all their franchisees as their ones, their twos, and their threes. And the greatest opportunity is to get those twos to be more like the ones. With the threes, what I recommend to them is, look, do whatever you have to do according to your franchise agreement, but don't put too much time into trying to lift them up because they're actively resisting you and they don't really have what it takes. The best thing for them to hopefully be to exit the system, and hopefully that can be done in a friendly way, in a legal way. So they shouldn't be neglected, but the best use of a franchisor's time is really elevating that middle tier franchisee, which is most of them, to be more like the top. But in order to do that, you have to understand what is it that top franchisees all have in common. And there's a lot of misnomers, a lot of myths, such as, well, they all have great locations, or they are all working there 24 hours a day and they're slaves to their business. They have a lot of education, they have a lot of experience. These things may or may not be true in individual cases, but in my research, in my writing of the book, in my interviewing thousands of franchisees over the years as a speaker prior to my presentation, these things are not what they all have in common. What they all have in common is a certain mindset. They all work really hard. They have good enough locations. They stick to the system. So that the operational pieces are critical, but that's not the secret to success. That is the prerequisite. You got to stick to the system. You have to engage your employees. You have to market the business. You have to control costs. All the things that are part of the operation, that's just the basic, just to run a decent business. To get to the next level, it comes down to everything human. What the individual franchisee brings to the business, which is something the franchisor can't control. So that's the franchisee's ability to keep a clear head when things get tough, or to keep a clear head when they're excited about something. You don't want to be upset or angry, nor do you want to be excited or overly enthusiastic. You want to be clear. So that's the first thing, is they're really good at maintaining a clear head, making all decisions from what I call a point of clarity. So that's one thing. They all actively stick to the system. They didn't invest in a franchise because they're creative or innovative. They outsource that to the franchisor. They're paying to mitigate the risk. So they stick to the system. They use their business to improve the lives of everyone it touches. So they don't just direct their employees' work. They really try to develop the employees themselves into leaders, which will save them time. They work hard not just to keep their promise to the customer and give them the product, service, or solution they paid for. They also want to elevate their emotional state, because they understand what determines if customers will remember them, talk about them, and come back isn't what they got as much as what they felt. So they actively use their business to make people feel good. And then on top of that, they create cultures. They don't just build a team of people, they build a culture. They really care about the work environment. And building a culture, there's a lot more to it than just being nice to employees or compensating them. Some very deliberate things we have to do to build culture. So everything I just mentioned, what they all have in common is they're human in nature. And you can be really bad at these things and still stick to the system. You can still market the business, hire employees. You can still, cook your cheeseburgers or kill the bugs or provide the senior in-home care. You can do everything the franchise agreement says at a very mediocre level. Because the franchise agreement doesn't get into these human elements. But wealthy franchisees are masters of these things, and they infuse that into their operations, and that's the winning combination.
Yeah, that's really good. There's a lot of people that get involved in franchising that may not have really ever had experience managing other people or hiring other people. What? I know this is kind of like a loaded question, but what advice would you give to someone like that on the tools and strategies to really learning, that human aspect of hiring, training, and developing? And before you answer, I'll tell you, just as an example, I feel like, when we opened our first franchise location 4 years ago, this was something that I had to learn through. Even recently, I have a relatively new manager at my store in Florida, and he kept texting me, asking me questions, and which is good. But I had to have that conversation with him of, one, I hired you for you to be in charge and run it. Is your question urgent right now? Is this something that you need to be texting me, or can it wait for our weekly meeting on Tuesday? He was like, it can wait till our meeting on Tuesday. And I found myself getting a little bit annoyed, because I felt like he was peppering me with questions, and I had to consciously be aware of that feeling of annoyance and frustration I was feeling, so that I could make sure I was still respecting him and using that as an opportunity to teach him, and develop him, as opposed to just get annoyed. Like, hey, why do you keep asking me questions? So how can people develop that when they haven't had any experience managing or leading people?
Well, it's a great question, and I have a number of responses here. The first thing to understand, if you don't have a lot of experience successfully managing people and watching them perform better under your supervision, you're not going to get a lot of training on that from your franchisor for two reasons. Number one, the franchisors themselves may not really know how to do this. Number two, even if they do, they're reluctant to teach it to franchisees for a very specific reason. There's something called joint employer status, where the franchisor is legally considered the employer of the employee, as opposed to the franchisee. So if we look at, the most well-known franchise system, McDonald's, there are lots of lawyers who, if there's one employee who is working at a McDonald's in Miami, Florida, and that employee isn't treated well, a lawyer would much rather sue McDonald's corporate in Chicago with their deeper pockets than the individual franchisee. But the franchise model, for those who understand it, know the people in Chicago, they're not the employer. It's the person who owns the location in Miami. Well, if there's joint employer status, it means that the franchisor themselves can be seen as an employer and therefore have liability. So in order to protect themselves, franchisors have a very hands-off approach when it comes to the franchisees' human resources, managing employees, and therefore many of them want nothing to do with leadership training or management training. So it's very common for someone to enter a franchise system. They learn the recipes, they learn the systems, but they don't necessarily learn leadership itself. So it's up to the franchisees to get educated. So having said that, I think one of the biggest mistakes that I see franchisees make is they want to hire people who are ready to work without adequately training them. They want them to come in and just have the skill set. And that's just not how it works. People need to be trained, and they can't be left to their devices until we can confirm that they have both a high skill set and a high mindset. I talk about this extensively in the book. The average manager or the average franchisee gives someone some quick training and they say, "You got it?" And the person is nervous, they're overwhelmed. They don't want to say they don't got it because they don't want to look like an idiot. So they say, "Yeah, I got it." And then the franchisor or the manager, they don't really confirm that the person has it. They said, "Yes, great." They move on to the next thing. So most people are inadequately trained. And that's why a lot of them have questions. So I don't know your circumstances, Tarek, but it could be your fault that maybe you didn't train your manager well enough. But I will tell you this. I also think there's something to be said for when situations come up, for letting employees figure it out. The best way to learn very often isn't to be taught, but to actively solve problems. So I had a policy with my manager, Tarek, which you can use this if you want. Whenever she'd call me myself, and if I saw it wasn't her, I never answered. I let her leave a message. I listened to the message. If there was a problem, I wouldn't return the call for 45 minutes. 9 times out of 10, in that 45 minutes, she figured it out. And I didn't tell her that for years that that's what I was doing. Because I didn't want her, any of my employees, to rely on me, to depend on me. I wanted them to be problem solvers, because the more independent they could be, the less dependent they were on me, so I could be out doing other things. So I guess what I would say is this: don't expect a lot of management training from your franchisor. Get whatever training you need. I can recommend a pretty good book in the franchise space that does this. Get whatever training you need. Then really spend time training your employees, focusing on elevating their skill set as well as their mindset. And then give them the space to make mistakes, to make that okay, and help them learn through that.
Wow, that's really, really good. Is that why you haven't been returning my calls too? You've been trying to get me to figure it out and problem solve on my own?
Oh, shucks. Now you've got to figure it out. But you see, you learn that without me having to teach it to you.
That's awesome. Wow, I really like that that strategy to really kind of delay answering their phone calls so that they can figure it out on their own. I think that's a fascinating concept, and sometimes that happens unintentionally, right? Where it's like you miss a call and then you call back or you text back and it's like, "Oh yeah, I went up figuring it out." And so interesting concept. You talk about in your book about how there are sometimes franchisees that are the wealthy franchisee that can go in and wind up taking over a franchise business and that was struggling, and they can increase their sales. They can totally turn it around. A lot of the people that watch some of my content online, they are not yet into franchising. I talk a lot about the value of buying an existing franchise business. I'm a huge proponent of that. How could the wealthy franchisee help someone who is buying, let's say, a struggling franchise location or a franchise location that they want to increase the performance of, what would the book do to support them through that process from a tactical standpoint?
The book paints a very clear picture of the profile of the wealthy franchisee and all the things that they do that enable them to be successful. And one of the points that the book makes is that it's all things that can be copied and replicated. It's not stuff you have to be born with. So anybody can look at the profile of the wealthy franchisee and replicate them. So by knowing what these things are, well, then you can look at an existing business that's underperforming and see that if they're not doing these things, well, then there's things that you could do to make it successful. What you don't want to do is go into a business that's being beautifully run, that has a manager and a franchisee with the right kind of mindset, and they're doing all this marketing and the business still isn't making money. That's not good. You want to look for something that's underperforming because you know what it's capable of, because you see what it is that they are not doing. So our second location, that's what it was. We, at the time, there were 105 stores in California. The week that I bought our second location, which was already in existence, my first store was ranked number 1 out of 105 stores. The location I bought was ranked 104th. Okay. Almost the complete other end of the spectrum. And it'd be a better story, honestly, if it was 105th, but I'll give the guy some credit. It was 104th. But I saw all the things that they weren't doing. I saw that they had very, very bad online reviews. I saw they didn't have a lot of employees. The employees were there, didn't seem very engaged. I saw all the things that weren't going on. So for me, it was like, well, we just have to, make these kinds of changes, and we should get an instant increase in sales. And that's exactly what happened. So the idea behind reading, this book, or just learning at all about what enables franchisees to succeed, if you know that going into it, well, then you can better evaluate opportunities for pre-existing businesses to see if they're embracing these concepts themselves. If not, then that might be a diamond in the rough.
Yeah, that's I really like that a lot. Now, for someone who is about to buy a franchise, right? So they're in the process of searching, like what is it besides doing the proper due diligence and selecting the business, but what should they be doing? What's maybe 1 or 2 things that they should be doing, or skill sets that they should be developing in order to prepare them to be able to run their business and successfully and fill in the gaps that the franchisor does not?
Such a great question. Most people understand that when you buy a franchise, you have to learn the system. So you go through the company's training. They'll probably come on site if it's, like a brick and mortar concept for a while as well. They'll give you access to a manual, perhaps some training videos to really learn the system. Those things are important. What's not anticipated, what's typically not discussed, are all of these human issues that we've talked about. So the ability to be very self-aware, to reflect on your own thoughts and your own emotions, your own biases, and to really understand your impact on your business. You want to make sure that you're a liability, that you're an asset to your business and not a liability. So I think to prepare to run one's own business, they need to understand what are the common biases of franchisees, what are the common mind traps, the common things that kind of mess with their head, to really know what those things are, so you can figure out what to do in advance when that happens. So what are you going to do when suddenly you're in crisis because a key employee quits or doesn't show up, when suddenly sales drop or suddenly something breaks, or you get that phone call in the middle of the night? What are you going to do when you get complaints from customers? To really think about those things and reflect on not just what are you going to do, but who are you going to be? And equally important, not just on who you need to hire, but what is the culture that you want to create? How would you describe it? What is the mission of your business besides making money? What are the values that will impact all the decisions you're going to make? And then really ask yourself how you can use those values to help determine what your mission is going to be, your approach to customer service, your approach to marketing, your approach to managing employees. To really think about all those human factors in advance. You're not going to get much of this from your franchisor. So you want to prepare yourself for this, because when you do, you'll execute operations at a much higher level.
Yeah, I like that a lot. It's interesting. You talked about some of the things that people do not get from their franchisor. And, this was one of the things that was really surprising to me, starting and buying our first franchise location is that there were a lot of gaps. I guess I didn't know what I didn't know. And, I tell that to people all the time is you're buying a system, you're buying the rights to operate that system. But what I found is that if I knew the question to ask the franchisor, they would answer the question. If I didn't know to ask the question, I wouldn't get the answer. And so, I think that's something that people struggle with in the franchise space. I know that you speak to a lot of franchisors. Real quick, we could have done this at the beginning, but you've spoken to and helped some really big brands. What are some of the brands that you've worked with out there that people would know?
You have your huge brands, and you have their mid-sized brands, and you have the emerging brands. And I work with all three. So I have worked with McDonald's, Great Clips, Anytime Fitness, Wyndham Hotel Group, Smoothie King. I mean, some pretty big players. And then recently I did a virtual presentation for a franchise that I think has 8 franchisees. So there's quite a range there. And, I love doing all of it because there's a lot for me to learn and hopefully a lot that I can contribute to all those different sizes.
Yeah. When you go and speak, you talked about in the book how people, will come up to you and tell you about their problems and their challenges. What do you think is there a common theme if you had to say, okay, this is the one reason why people fail as franchise owners or why they struggle? Would you be able to nail it down to one thing overall?
I could generalize, but there's a lot of reasons. Sometimes people do open up in a bad location. Sometimes people don't have enough capital on hand to deal with a rainy day. Sometimes people are getting everything right, and suddenly there's a pandemic that shuts down their business for an extended period of time, and they just can't make it last. So there are some outside things. But I'd say probably if I had to really generalize, the most common reason why I see people not making it, it's because of this human factor and them not being masters of it. They think because they're working hard and because they're busy that they're making forward progress. But activity is not productivity. And action isn't necessarily forward motion. And they just don't understand these human elements and how that's something that they can completely control. So when they add those things to already proven systems, that's a great recipe to really increase your chances of being successful. And so I think there's a lot of people who have great businesses, they just don't know what to do with them. I mean, I could give you the world's greatest hammer. And if you pick it up like this and you go like this and you complain to me, well, it's not doing a good job hammering in nails, it's not the hammer's fault. It's because the person didn't know how to work the hammer. And I think with franchise businesses, a lot of people are taking a great concept in the right neighborhoods with the right systems, but they're not executing the right way because they don't get it, because they're not really controlling their head and they don't get the results they want. So unless you really are thinking and behaving like a wealthy franchisee, you're really not in any position to accurately gauge how good a business you have.
Yeah, that's good. So we all have favorites at times, and the book overall is phenomenal. What's your personal favorite chapter besides all of it? But what chapter do you feel like resonates with you the most, or you maybe enjoyed writing the most or researching?
Probably the section called About the Author. No, I'm joking. Yeah, that was one of the harder ones. I'm really passionate about customer service, to be honest with you. And so I think that's the one. That was actually the first chapter I wrote. I think it's the longest chapter because I had so much to say. And that's how we built our businesses, was really being passionate about customer service. But you can't have good customer service unless you build a great team of employees. So in terms of substance, I think the greatest hard skills are probably in the second chapter that is about managing employees. So there's 2 chapters on employees. It's the only topic that gets 2 chapters in the book. The first one's about building a great team, and the second chapter is about managing them. In that second chapter, there's a lot of hard skills tools. on coaching employees and managers. So I think for a lot of other people, tell me that's one of their favorite chapters. But for me personally, I was really passionate about the customer service one.
Yeah. Yeah. Customer service is it can really make or break you or a business. I mean, it's so key. That was one of the signs when I knew things were starting to go a little bit downhill at one of my locations, is the number of customer complaints were starting to increase. And when people would go and complain on the corporate website, I would get CC'd on it. And we really had to do an overhaul. What I found, it's so interesting how it's all linked, right? Because if you hire the wrong people and don't master that part, right? You dedicated 2 chapters in the book to that, then it's hard to deliver great customer service if you got people with bad attitudes. Like, as much as you might talk about customer service, if you were to have to think of the concepts of the wealthy franchisee and succeeding in terms of building a house and having, let's say, the foundation and then level 1 and level 2, what would you say is the foundational key? And then number 1 and number 2 after that, if like you had to rank them in terms of succeeding as a franchisee?
The foundation for the house, the concrete slab, would be chapter 1, where I talk about the definition of a wealthy franchisee and how it's that mindset piece, the human piece. Everything gets built on that. Every aspect of the business, there's an operational side, but then there's that human side. So understanding human elements really is the foundation for that. So then on top of that, all that includes your own self-mastery, making sure that you are an asset to the business. So that's our own mindset. Then we take it one step outward, which I guess would then be the next level of the house. And that would be your ability to build and manage a great team. You said before, if you hire the wrong people, if you hire the right people, but you mismanage them, you may as well hire the wrong people, because you're still going to get poor performance. So really understanding how to recruit, how to train, how to manage, and how to motivate, and then keep them excited and motivated. That's the next level. So you have to get control of yourself first, your own mindset, then build and maintain a great team. And then the next level, if we were to extend it outward from me to my team, then it's to customers. So then providing an incredible customer experience that they're going to feel, that they're going to remember, that they're going to talk about and want to repeat.
I like that. All right, it looks like we have a couple of comments and questions over from the YouTube live stream. And, real quick, before we jump into talking about some of those, I just want to make sure everyone watching out there, I'm a critic. I'm such a skeptic with so many things. And I really genuinely can't say enough of how impressed I am by Scott in his book and just the content he puts out. It's so genuine. It's so usable. Like there's a lot of very general kind of woo-woo things and concepts out there, but you give some really good practical strategies and tools that people can apply. So, I highly recommend to go get this book. And quite honestly, even if you are just a business owner and you're just thinking about franchises and you don't own a franchise yet, you should still get it and get a step ahead, because I actually think going through this will not only increase your skill sets once you get into franchising, but I think it'll help you figure out how to find the right one too, in terms of just because you're putting yourself in the shoes of what it would be like owning and running that business. And then real quick, before we get to the comments and questions, Scott, I know that you have an actual online program, not just a book, but like a program that takes people through how to become a wealthy franchisee. Tell us a little bit about the program, how it works, and what the benefit really is for someone who owns a franchise.
Thank you. I'm delighted to talk about that. And I see on my end too that in the Zoom that those questions are coming in. So I'm excited to get to those. So thank you for your patience, but I'll mention this. It's called the Wealthy Franchisee Business Breakthrough Program. A lot of people contacted me after I wrote the book, wanting more and wanting to go deeper and wanting not just to read the book, but then to actually have some guidance. So I created an online experience as a resource to actually guide franchise business owners through the entire process of becoming a wealthy franchisee. So it's a 14-week program because franchisees are busy with 7 modules, each one where there is some instruction of me talking directly to you on video, some exercises, but the more importantly, action items to help you grow their business. There's some soft skills things helping you develop the right mindset, but also there's some hard skills, tools that you can actively use to make sure that you're thinking properly, tools to help you measure your team's performance. I have my coaching methodology, it's there, and tools to kind of keep track of how our employees are performing, customer service, cultivating relationship with the franchisor, some really practical things that franchisors just don't have the time or don't have the wherewithal to provide franchisees. So everything in that human element, that's what this course does. But I've been a franchisee for 10 years. I know the difference between motivational fluff and information actually helps you grow a business. So yeah, if people feel good taking the course, great. I want people to make money and grow their business. So in this course, I show people how, and then they also have access to a private Facebook group so you can interact with other franchise business owners and share ideas and ask questions and support each other. And also a monthly mastermind meeting that I moderate myself, where people submit questions and I answer them as a bit of interaction. So it's about creating a community and creating an experience to guide franchise business owners from where they are to where they want to be. And the cool thing I'll share with you, Tarek, is I have a number of franchisees who've enrolled and have bought the course, but I now have franchisors I've signed contracts with who are now having all the new franchisees go through the course as part of their onboarding to prepare them to be a franchisee. So the franchisee gets training in the system from the franchisor, but now the franchisor is having go through my course to teach them the human elements so that they really are masters in both areas and can succeed. So that's what the course is all about.
That's amazing. That's really cool. I'm so excited to see your success with that and how that evolves to get those contracts at the franchisor level. I just think about my journey as a franchise owner and how much I've stumbled and fell and tried to figure things out on my own. And wow, I mean, when I'm going through your program and your course, but I would have loved to have gone through it 4 years ago when I was just signing on.
Yeah, I mean, me too. I mean, I learned these things the hard way, and I really learned them from interviewing other franchisees and preparing for all these speeches that I give and writing my book. And the cool thing is there's 3 tiers in the course. The highest tier, you get private coaching sessions with me, which I love because it's cool to give presentations to franchises and people are buying the book. That's great. But I really want to help people make more money. People get asking, how is the book doing? What they mean is, how is it selling? For me, the real measurement of how the book is doing is are people growing their businesses by using the information? And that's what the course is there. It's to give people a whole much deeper dive and a lot more resources and possibly some coaching so that they can really grow their businesses. So I'm super psyched about that opportunity to really help franchisees at a deeper level.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned the 3 tiers, and guys, we're going to hop on the questions in just a moment. But I know that I want to jump into this real quick before we jump to the comments. You have a special offer for some of the individuals for a limited time. Can you tell us a little bit about what that is and how they can take advantage of that?
Yeah, there's 3 tiers of the course. The difference between the middle tier has more content, some bonus material. It has access to the Facebook group and to the mastermind. The highest tier is all those things plus 12 private one-on-one coaching sessions with me. So those are the top 2 tiers, called the Pro and the Ultimate. And it's not a big investment given the possible return on what possible return that you can get. But for anybody who signs up for the Pro version or the Ultimate version by July 1st, you can get $250 off. And I think the Pro version is like $19.97 or something like that. And the Ultimate is like $49, close to $5,000. You can get $250 off either of those if you sign up for July 1st. Just go to thewealthyfranchisee.com and use the coupon code franchise250. So thewealthyfranchisee.com, use the coupon code franchise250. And if you sign up by July 1st, you'll get $250 off. And if anybody wants to actually speak with me or ask questions before signing up, they can contact me at info@thewealthyfranchisee.com.
Excellent. Awesome. And we'll make sure to include that in the description on YouTube as well. All right. So let's hop to some of these questions and comments. Number one, we got a comment from Chris over on YouTube saying that he's looking to buy a liquor store that comes with a condo to live in. That's interesting. Selling as one with 30% down owner finance for $800,000, many years of profitable operation. Sounds like an interesting opportunity. Don't know if it would be a franchise, but do you think that, I think I know the answer to this, for someone who's buying an existing business that's not a franchise, do you think the book can help them? And if so, how?
I wrote the book for the franchise world because it's where I have experience and credibility, and I wanted to lock myself up as an expert in that space. But I've had a lot of people who buy or read the book who aren't franchisees. Easily 90% is applicable to anyone who is in business. Whether it's a franchise or whether it's a mom and pop, whether it's a corporate thing, hiring, managing employees, customer service, having the right mindset. All of these things are universal. So easily 80-90% of the content is relevant for anybody who's running a business.
Yeah. I love the fact that, actually, let me comment on that. I agree. Because I was thinking that, like, as I started reading your book, I was like, this is applicable to any business owner, not just franchisee. I mean, there's occasional terms about the franchisor and correlations there, but I thought, wow, I mean, really any entrepreneur could read that book and it would be impactful for them. So Chris, in that case, if you're buying that business and it's not a franchise, you should still go out and get Scott's book, because I think it'll help you. Two, just my comment on that, I tell a lot of people that want reaching out to me and are looking to buy businesses. And I talk about how you can buy an existing business and potentially get seller finance. Sometimes people get so caught up with trying to figure it all out on the before they even start, Scott, right? It's like they're like, they have this vision. Okay, I know that I want to be an entrepreneur. I know that I want to be a franchise owner, own a business. They get so caught up with where they are that they never get moving. And it just shows that with 30% down, maybe this guy wouldn't qualify for SBA. Maybe he can't get a business loan. But the owners financing it. Do you see that with franchise owners too? They get stuck and they never get started on a solution that could make their business better.
They do. A little bit of creativity, you can make anything happen. So I had my 2 stores. I sold them to another franchisee, and I financed it to him. He paid me over time. He paid me one fee in the beginning, then he paid me over time. We had a written agreement with, lawyers helped with to make sure that was secure. But I made more money because he was essentially paying interest. But for him, he didn't have to go through a bank and go through all the rigmarole and provide that stuff. And so it was easy. And, honestly, I was kind of eager to get out. And so I was more flexible. And this happens all the time. So if maybe you don't have enough credit or don't have enough money, but the current owner is eager enough to get out, they might create some really easy terms for you where you pay them over time. Even if you pay them a lot more money, if the payments are spread out, who cares what the monthly payment is if you can make it? So yeah, I think there's could be some real opportunities. And is it my understanding that the liquor store comes with a place to sleep?
Yeah, it has a condo.
So it's like a twist on a bed and breakfast. It's like bed and beer. It's you had me at beer. So yeah, go for it.
Oh, awesome. Chris, the guy that's buying that liquor store, he said, what can your book teach me about the types of questions I should be asking the current owner?
The book won't tell you that much. There are plenty of books out there about buying a business, buying a franchise. This is really more about once you have one. But what I will say to you is when you look at the profit and loss statement, understand that number one, all the data that's there is based off of what they put into the profit and loss statement, which may not be there. And even if the data is accurate, it's a reflection of their performance, not necessarily yours. You want to see what the sales are. You want to see what they're spending on marketing. You want to see what they're spending on labor. And then in your mind, think about what it should be. So if you want to get into the liquor store business, do some research about the liquor industry and find out what are the benchmarks. What percentage of sales should be going towards rent, should be going towards marketing, should be going to labor? Know what the standards are so that you can see how the current operator is doing relative to the standards. And if they're coming in under, well, then they might be really getting a lot of profit, as much as they're going to get. But if they're spending too much on these things, and you know that you can reduce those costs, well, now there's more opportunity to increase the margins. So get an idea of what the standard costs are for the business, what they should be. as a percentage of sales and compare that to how the current owner is doing. Don't just look at the bottom line. You want to know what you could get with the same business.
Yeah, I love that. That's really, really good advice. And Chris, also in addition to that, I have a video on YouTube. I'm wondering if at some point we can add the link to it. But it's, I think, almost a 30-minute long video about if you're buying an existing business, and I go through step by step all of the minutia of what you need to do in terms of due diligence and all of that stuff. So check that out, because I think that'll be able to help you. All right, we have another question from Deandra. I think Deandra is the one from Jamaica. I want to know the very first step. I want to know I'm not sure there. I think there's a typo here. I want to know the first step, and I want to buy a franchise business. All right, so she was just making a comment. I'm pretty sure this is the young lady that's 17 years old in Jamaica. Yeah.
First step is graduate high school. For sure. Make sure that you have money lined up before you even make those steps. Know what kind of money you have, what kind of money you have access to. I don't know what the laws are in Jamaica, but you might need someone to kind of co-sign for this, a legal adult, that kind of thing. But then search your soul before you search for opportunities. Like, what kind of lifestyle do you want to have? I don't mean, in the future when you're wealthy. I mean, in your path to building wealth. Do you want a business where you're really serving people? Do you want a business that's very simple? Do you want a business that only operates during 9 to 5, Monday through Friday? Really understand what are all the things that are important to you in yourself. Think about the lifestyle you want and what you care about. Then look for franchise opportunities that match that lifestyle. And it really varies. Something like a restaurant brings a certain level of stress to other people. Some people want something where it doesn't involve having a lot of employees. Some people want to have a lot of employees. Are you looking just to have one business, or are you looking for something you can grow and expand? But you need to do a lot of soul searching to make that determination. So ask yourself those questions first, then look for opportunities to match it. That would be your first step.
That's so good. That's such a key part. I talk about that all the time as well, Scott, is that it's like you got to start with the end in mind. Like, so many people like us make mistakes, and we kind of choose the business first, right? Like you were saying, you got excited about the opportunity and not really thinking like, how is this going to affect my life? Like, what do I want in my life? How do I want to live my life? I used to play golf every weekend, like all weekend. And then I opened a juice bar business that's, open pretty much 363 days a year. So that was the beginning of my golf game being killed, and then having a child.
And here's something else. If you have something like a juice business, and I don't know if you were doing catering kinds of things and delivering smoothies, but there are some businesses where it's consumable, or it's something where people are just showing up and they're buying it. Maybe think of someone who has a shoe polishing stand. They're there, someone walks in with their shoes, they polish their shoes, and maybe that's it. Edible arrangements, people placed orders in advance, and then they want the arrangement delivered on a certain day. So we never had the option of just saying, hey, you know what? We think we're just not going to open today, because people were placing orders in advance, and we were responsible for getting those orders delivered. There's a whole other layer of responsibility there that you wouldn't necessarily get in an ice cream store or something like that. So it's really important to understand the lifestyle issues around the kind of business that you're buying, and make sure that it's cool with the kind of lifestyle you actually want to live.
Yeah, super key. Another question from Deandra on YouTube. Where can she purchase your book?
Anywhere books are sold. So, Amazon.com is where most people would do it, but, Barnes and Noble or Entrepreneur, the magazine, they're the publishers on their website. In fact, I think they're running a special because it's Prime Week right now, so you can order it there. But pretty much anywhere books are sold, and it is available not only in book form, but also there's an ebook and there's an audiobook.
Awesome, very, very good. Let's see. We got looks like we had a couple of questions come in from Rajjeet. Looks like they're overall the same thing. He says, "What are the upcoming pizza franchises you were noticing in California? How does buying a territory work? What are the requirements?"
Okay, the first question is the upcoming pizza franchises. Is that right?
Yeah.
They come and
Yes.
go in such quantity so fast that by the time I answer the question, the answer would change. So there's a lot of pizza. And again, I'm not necessarily an expert in the product lines themselves of these different franchises. I'm more interested in sort of the broader operational pieces and the human elements of it. But there are a whole lot of them. So the question is, do you want to be with a new concept that seems to be exciting, or do you want something that's been around for a long time and is established and has the infrastructure there? Something like Domino's, it might have, fewer available territories, but it has a history. It has processes that are there. A newer concept may not have as many processes in place. It's not tested, but you're also probably going to be able to get it cheaper, and there might be a lot more available territory. So I can't specifically answer that about pizza, but there are many of them. But pizza has kind of always been here. I think it'll always be here. It's not like ice cream has always been around. Frozen yogurt kind of comes and goes. So I can't really answer that question. But what were the other questions besides the pizza part?
What one was, how does buying a territory work, and what are the requirements?
So it absolutely depends on the franchise. So many franchises will say, all right, what we're selling you is a territory where you can do business. So it might be a retail store like a 7-Eleven or, Edible Arrangements or something like that. And they might say, okay, you can have access to a zip code or a series of zip codes. They'll define what a territory is, and then they'll dictate what is allowed. Like they might say within a zip code, you're the only one who can operate. Or for a certain radius, a certain amount of miles, they'll only sell one there. Other concepts, they'll say we can put in as many as we want, anywhere we want. So it's controversial within a franchise system, but franchisors will say, well, that one location isn't doing enough to service all the people who are there, so they'll want to sell another one there. So when you're buying a territory, you want to hear what their policy is, but it's something you can negotiate. Edible Arrangements originally offered me one zip code. And I said, yeah, but the population, it's really not enough. There's a contiguous zip code and they work together. And for me to provide, I gave them a whole argument why they should give me both, and they agreed to it. So that's something you might be able to negotiate a little bit. So it all depends on the franchise and what the concept is.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I think sometimes in the process, people need to remember that to step into their leadership. Right. Sometimes people, especially since they're buying a franchise or getting involved in a system, it's like they just expect to just step in and just be a cog in the wheel, right? As opposed to using their own head and thinking and really being the leader of their life. It comes down to that mindset part that you said is the foundation, the concrete slab, I think.
Yeah. So ask questions. Another thing with the territory too is, usually a franchisor will know the right demographics and how big a population needs to be to sustain the business. So ideally, when they're offering you a territory, there's enough people and enough of the right kinds of people to sustain that business. But you want to do your own due diligence to make sure that their numbers are correct. And if you can kind of negotiate a bigger territory or a denser territory, you want to do that. But that's really important to understand what kind of customers and what size of customer base is needed to sustain a business. It's really important you know what that is before you commit to a territory.
Yeah, totally agree with that. Awesome. We dropped a link for Amazon for you guys to grab Scott's book there. So make sure to go do that. It's a really amazing book. Again, whether you are a current franchise owner, whether you want to be a franchise owner, quite honestly, if you're on this webinar, if you're watching this, you obviously are either a business owner or want to be a business owner, so you should buy the book. That's basically the prerequisite. Scott, I really appreciate you coming on and having this conversation with you. I've enjoyed it so much. As a reminder, everyone make sure to go over to his website and check out his Wealthy Franchisee program. You get that discount code of $250 off. Scott, any closing words that you'd like to throw in?
I respect anybody who pulls a trigger and buys a business. Over the years, I've had so many people come to me with questions and all that. But what most people don't do is just muster the courage to do it. You're never going to get enough data or enough questions answered where you can have absolute certainty that it's the right thing to do. So it takes some courage. So do your homework, do your due diligence, look for the right opportunity, but know at some point you're going to have to muster the courage to make a decision. And you're going to have to search your soul to see if it's the right thing for you. But anybody who explores it, anybody who's interested, certainly has my respect. For me, it was a great choice, and I'm so grateful that I did it. For other people, having a normal job is a better choice for them. So only you can answer that question. But it's a model that I love, that I appreciate, and I think there's a lot of opportunities there for people who are willing to work smart and really control their heads.
Yeah, absolutely. Looks like we have one last question that trickled in. If we want to answer this quickly, it's from Deandra again. Is it better buying a location or building one?
Buying a location or building one?
Yeah, is it better buying an existing location or opening a new location?
The answer is it depends. There are advantages and disadvantages to both, and I'll explain them. And until we even know the characteristics of the existing location, it's hard to answer. When you buy a new location, it's fresh, it's new, you're in control, you're going to have fresh paint, and you can do things your way and build it where you want it, and all those things are great. You're not burdened by the bad reputation of a previous owner. You're not having to acquire a staff that's already there who might resist the change of you taking over. So there are some advantages there. The advantage of buying a pre-existing business is that it's there, it's up, it's running, and as soon as they hand you the keys, there's revenue. Things are already in place, and so you can move more quickly. Now, if it was poorly run, it might take some time for you to change that business's reputation. If it's run and it's doing well, it might be more expensive to buy it compared to starting your own. But the opposite is also true. If it's up and running and it's losing money, they might be desperate. I have seen plenty of times where a franchisor just said, here, you know what? If you'll just pay off the remaining balance of the debt, you can have the keys and you can get in and buy it dirt cheap. So it just depends on what the situation is. There's advantages and disadvantages to both. And if something that's pre-existing, you have a bit more information, you know what you're getting into, but what you're getting into may be challenging. So it all depends on the situation, but both can be very good, viable options.
Yeah, absolutely. Great. Awesome. Scott, thank you so much for joining us, and look forward to our next conversation already. Look forward to finishing your book, The Wealthy Franchisee, and making sure that I have all these implemented into myself and my franchise system as well.
It's always fun to talk to you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. All right, everyone. Have a great night.